All right, so I've done most of the prep work, so we're pretty much just going to jump right back in. The only caveat I will say is while I am recording on this monitor right here, I also have another monitor over yonder where I have decided that I'm going to put a comfort movie on in the background, but it's going to be muted. And if you were curious, I apologize for the person who I've originally intended this reading to be for, but for personal reasons, for um, yeah, sorry. It's Scott Pilgrim versus the World, and I'm sorry. I know that you don't like that movie, and I know that you've also told me in general that you just don't like Scott Pilgrim, but it's something that helps keep me grounded, and maybe I'll do an alternate video where I explain why that is. But in the meantime, let's just jump right back into the reading. I have my drinks here, and we are on 28. So. The reason I wanted to mention that is because if you see any like flashing reflections in my glasses and wonder what it could be, it's whatever is playing in the movie. But this camera's not the greatest, so it's probably not going to pick that up. I've already wasted over a minute talking, so let's jump right in. 28. Geez, Cather, if you need a break, just tell me. Levi was lying on her dorm room bed, and he just told her that he was going home for a few days for his sister's birthday party instead of saying, I'll miss you, or even have fun, Kath had said. Oh, that's perfect. I didn't mean it like that. Yeah, I didn't mean it like that. She apologized. It's just my dad's going to Tulsa this weekend and he doesn't need me. And if you're going home, you won't need me. I, that means I have all weekend to write. I'm so far behind on Carry On. So far behind and so out of rhythm. If she didn't work on her fic at least a little bit every day, Kath lost the thread of it, the momentum. She ended up writing long, go nowhere conversations or scenes where Baz and Simon memorized the planes in each other's faces. These scenes were weirdly popular with commenters, but they didn't help the story along. I still need you, Levi said, teasing. Uh, There followed a long, go-nowhere conversation during which she tried to memorize the planes of his face. It was harder than you'd think. They were constantly shifting. She'd almost kissed him then. She'd almost kissed him. She'd almost kissed him again this afternoon when he'd stopped by her dormitory to say goodbye on his way out of town. Kath had stood on the sidewalk, and Levi had leaned out of the cab of his truck. And it would have been so easy just to meet him halfway. It would have been safe, too, because he was trapped in the truck and also leaving the city. So no cascade effects, no one thing leads to another, no another. If Kath had kissed him, if she'd let Levi know that he could kiss her, she wouldn't still be living off that half asleep kiss from November. It had been 6 hours since Levi left for Arnold, and Kath had already written 2,000 words of Simon. She made so much progress tonight. She was thinking about taking a break tomorrow to start her fiction writing assignment. Maybe she'd even finish it. It would be awesome to tell Levi she was done when he came home on Sunday. Kath was leaning back in her chair, stretching her arms, when the door flew open and Reagan barged in. Kath didn't even jump. Well, look who we have here, Reagan said, all by her lonesome. Shouldn't you be off bonding somewhere with the pride of Arnold? He went home for his sister's birthday. I know. Reagan walked over to her closet and stood there, deliberating. He tried to get me to ride with him. That boy's allergic to solitude. He tried to get me to go with him too, Cass said. Where would you have stayed? He hadn't worked that out. Ha, Reagan said, loosening her Olive Garden necktie. I'd go back to Arnold for that, to see you meet Marlies. Is she really that bad? Probably not anymore. I broke her in for you. Reagan lifted her white button-down shirt over her head and reached for a black sweater. Her bra was bright purple. This is exactly the sort of thing that crawled into Cass' head and kept her from kissing Levi. getting to see his ex-girlfriend's Technicolor lingerie, knowing exactly who it was who broke him in. If only Kath didn't like Reagan so much. Reagan crossed over to Kath's side of the room, leaning over and sticking the top of her head in Kath's face. Does my hair smell like garlic bread? Kath took a cautious breath, not unpleasantly. Damn, Reagan said, standing back up. I don't have time to wash it. She shook her hair out in front of the mirror on the door, then picked up her purse. Okay, she said. Unless something goes incredibly wrong, you should have the room to yourself tonight. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. I haven't so far, Kath said dryly. Reagan snorted and walked out. Kath frowned at the door. Don't be jealous. There was already a rule about this, but Cass should make another, just for herself. Don't compare yourself to Reagan. It's like comparing apples and grapefruits. When her phone rang a few minutes later, Cass shook off the last of her green feelings and smiled. Levi was supposed to call her before he went to bed. She picked up the phone and was about to answer when she saw Wren's name on the screen. Wren. She and Wren hadn't talked. They hadn't even texted since Christmas break, almost 3 months ago. Why would Wren be calling now? Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was just another wrong C. Kath held the phone in her palm and stared at it, like she was waiting for an explanation. The phone stopped ringing. Kath watched. It started again. Wren. Kath pushed accept and held the phone up to her ear. Hello? Hello? It wasn't Wren's voice. Cather? Yes? Thank God. It's your mom. Your mom. She pulled her ear away. Cather? Yes, Kath said faintly. I'm at the hospital with Wren. Your mom. Cather. Wren. Why? Is she okay? She had too much to drink. Honestly, I don't really know anything. Someone dropped her off. I thought maybe you'd know. No, Kath said. I don't. I'm coming. You're at the hospital? St. Elizabeth's. I'll call you. I called your dad already. He's flying back. Right, Kath said. I'm coming. Okay, Laura said. Your mom. Good. Kath nodded, still holding the phone away from her ear, then let it drop to her lap and pressed end. Reagan came back for her. Kath tried to call Levi first, not because she thought he could help. He was 4 hours away, but she wanted to touch base. The tag kind of base, the kind that means safe. Levi didn't pick up, so she sent him a bare bones text. Runs in the hospital, then called her dad. He didn't pick up either. Reagan knew where St. Elizabeth's was and dropped Kath off at the front door. Do you need company? No, Kath said, hoping that Reagan would see right through her. Reagan didn't. She drove away, and Kath stood for a moment in the revolving door, feeling like she couldn't push through. The hospital was mostly locked up for the night. The reception desk was empty, and the main elevators were turned off. Kath eventually made her way to the emergency room. A clerk there told her that Wren was already upstairs, and she sent Kath down another empty hallway. Eventually, she was stepping out of an elevator onto the 6th floor. Not sure whom she was looking for. When she tried to picture Laura, all Kath could remember was that her mother looked like what her mother looked like in family photos. Long brown hair and big brown eyes, silver rings, faded jeans, and a simple yellow sundress on her wedding day. Already starting to show. That woman wasn't here. The waiting room was empty except for a blonde woman sitting in the corner, her fist clenched in her lap. She looked up at Kath she looked up when Kath entered the room. Cather? It took her a few seconds for the lines and colors to resolve into a face that Kath thought she might recognize. In those seconds, a part of Kath ran to the blonde stranger, wrapped her arms around her thighs and pressed her face into her stomach. Part of Kath screamed as loud as she could, and part of her set the whole world on fire just to watch it burn. The woman stood up and stepped towards Kath. Kath stood still. Laura walked past her to the nurse's station and said something quietly. You're the sister? The nurse asked, looking up. Kath nodded. We just need you to answer a few questions. Kath did her best. She didn't know what Wren had been drinking. She didn't know where she'd been or whom she'd been with. All the other questions felt like things Kath shouldn't answer in front of a stranger, in front of Laura, who was just standing there, watching Kath's face like she was taking notes. Kath looked at her, helplessly, defensively, and Laura walked back to the corner. Was Wren a regular drinker? Yes. Did she often drink to drunkenness? Yes. Did she black out? Yes. Did she use any other drugs? I don't know. Was she on any medication? Birth control. Do you have an insurance card? Yes. Can I see her? Kath asked. Not yet, the nurse answered. Is she okay? I'm not her nurse, but the doctor just briefed your mom. Kath looked back at Laura, at her mom, at this upset blonde woman with tired eyes and really expensive jeans. Kath went to sit across from her, steadying herself. This wasn't a reunion. This wasn't anything. Kath was here for Wren. Is she okay? Her mom looked up. I think so. She hasn't woken up yet. Someone dropped her off at the emergency room a few hours ago, then left. I guess she wasn't breathing enough. I don't really know how it works. They've given her fluids. It's just time now. Waiting. Laura's hair was cut into a long bob that hung like two sharp wings under her chin. She was wearing a stiff white shirt, too many rings on her fingers. Why did they call you? Kath asked. Maybe it was a rude thing to ask. She didn't care. Oh, Laura said. She reached into a cream-colored coach bag and pulled out Wren's phone, holding it across the aisle. Kath took it. They all looked in her. They looked in her contacts. Laura said. They always call the mom first. The mom, Kath thought. Kath dialed her dad's number. It went straight to voicemail. She stood up and walked a few chairs away for 2 feet of privacy. Dad, it's Kath. I'm at the hospital. I haven't seen Wren yet. I'll call you when I know more. I talked to him earlier, Laura said. He's in Tulsa. I know, Kath said, looking down at the phone. Why didn't he call me? I said I would. He had to call the airline. Kath sat back down, not right across from Laura anymore. She didn't have anything more to say, and there wasn't nothing more she wanted to hear. You, Laura cleared her throat. She was starting every sentence like she didn't have the breath to finish it. You still look so much alike. Kath jerked her head up toward her. It was like looking at nobody at all. And then it was like looking at the person you expected to see comforting you when you woke up from a nightmare. Whenever Levi had to ask about her mother, Kath always said she didn't remember much, and that had always been true. But now it wasn't. Now, just sitting this close to Laura unlocked some secret, half-sized door in Kath's brain, and she could see her mom, in perfect focus, sitting on the other side of their dining room table. She was laughing at something Wren had said, so Wren kept saying it, and their mom had kept laughing. She laughed through her nose. Her hair was dark, and she tucked Sharpies into her ponytail, and she could draw anything, a flower, a seahorse, a unicorn. And when she was irritated, she snapped at them, snapped at her fingers, snap, 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 while she was talking on the phone. Stern eyebrows, bared teeth. Shh. She was in the bedroom with their dad, shouting. She was at the zoo, helping Wren chase a peacock. She was rolling out the dough for gingerbread cookies. She was on the phone, snapping. She was in the bedroom, yelling. She was standing on the porch, pushing Kath's hair behind her ears again and again, stroking her cheek with a long, flat thumb and making promises she wasn't going to keep. We're twins, Kath said, because it was the stupidest thing she could think to say, because that's what you still look so much alike. Deserved when your mom was the one saying it. Kath took out her phone and texted Levi. At the hospital now, still haven't seen Wren. Alcohol poisoning. My mom's here. I'll call you tomorrow. And then she texted, I'm glad that you're out there somewhere eventually reading this. It makes me feel better. Her battery indicator turned red. Laura got out her phone too. Why was Kath calling her that? When she was a kid, Kath hadn't even known their mom's name. Their dad called her Honey. Honey, strained, intense, and careful Honey, and their mom called him Art. Laura was texting somebody, probably her husband, and for some reason it pissed Kath off. She was texting someone right now that she was flaunting her new life. Kath folded her arms and watched the nurse's station. When she felt the tears coming on, she told herself that they were for Ren, and surely some of them were. They waited and waited, but not together. Laura got up to use the bathroom once. She walked like Ren, hips swaying, flickering, her hair away from her face. Would you like some coffee? She asked. No, thank you, Kath said. While Laura was gone, Kath tried to call her dad again. If she answered the phone, she was pretty sure she'd cry some more. She might even call him Daddy. He didn't answer. Laura brought a bottle of water and set it on the table next to Kath. Kath didn't open it. The nurses ignored them. Laura flipped through a magazine. When a doctor walked out of the waiting room, they both sat up. Mrs. Avery, he said, looking up at Kath's mother. How is she? Laura said, which Kath thought was a deft response. I think she's going to be fine, the doctor said. Her breathing is good. Her oxygen is good. She's sucking up those fluids, and she roused a bit to talk to me a few minutes ago. I think this is just going to be a scare. Sometimes a scare can be valuable. Can I see her? Kath asked. The doctor looked over at Kath. She could almost hear him think. Twins. Yeah, he said. That should be fine. We're just running another test. I'll have the nurse come out for you when we're done. Kath nodded and folded her arms again around her stomach. Thank you, Laura said. Kath went back to her chair to wait, but Laura stood there by the nurse's station. After a minute, she walked back to her chair and picked up her coach bag, tucking a used Kleenex into a pocket and nervously smoothing out the leather straps. Well, she said, I think I'm going to head home. What? Kath's head snapped. I should go, Laura said. Your dad will be here soon. But you can't. Laura slid her handbag up her arm. You heard the doctor. We're going to be able to see her in a few minutes. You should go see her, Laura said. You should go. You should come too. Is that what you really want? Laura's voice was sharp, and part of Kath shrank back. It's what Ren would want. Don't be so sure, Laura said, sounding tired again, pinching the bridge of her nose. Look, I shouldn't be here. It was a fluke. It was a fluke that they called me. You're here now. Your dad's on his way. You don't just leave somebody alone in the hospital, Kath said. It came out a flame. Ren's not alone, Laura said sternly. She has you. Kath jerked to her feet, and Kath jerked to her feet and swayed there. Not Ren, she thought. I didn't mean Ren. Laura wrenched her handbag. Laura wrenched her handbag straps together. Cather, you can't leave like this. It's the right thing to do, Laura said, lowering her voice. In what alternate universe? Kath felt the rage burst up inside her like a cork popping. What sort of mother leaves the hospital without seeing her kid? What sort of mother leaves? Ren is unconscious, and if you think that has nothing to do with you, you are skimming the surface of reality, and I'm right here, and I know you haven't seen me for 10 years, and now you're leaving? Now? Don't make this about me, Laura hissed. You obviously don't want me here. I'm making it about me, Kath said. It's not my job to want you or not want you. It's not my job to earn you. Cather, Laura's mouth and fists were tight. I've reached out to you. I've tried. You're my mother, Kath said. Her fists were even tighter. Try harder. This isn't the time or the place for this, Laura said softly, steadily, tugging at her handbag. I'll talk to Ren later. I'd love to talk to you later, too. I'd love to talk to you, Cather, but I don't belong here right now. Kath shook her head. Now is all you get, she spat out, wishing she could make more sense, wishing for more words, or better ones. Now is all you'll ever get. Laura lifted her chin and flicked her hair away from her face. She wasn't listening anymore. She was the cool one. I don't belong here, she said again. I won't intrude like this. And then she walked away. Shoulders back, hips swaying. He'd have to tell the mage what he saw. I've finally seen the humdrum, sir. I know what we're fighting. Me. What's left of you, the monster had said. What? What is left of me? Simon wondered. A ghost? A hole? An echo? An angry little boy with nervous hands? From Chapter 24, Simon Snow and the Seventh Oak. Copyright 2010 by Jim T. Leslie. 29. It was another hour. Actually, hold on. I'm going to take a sip before I. Also, on a side note, I know that I wore this t-shirt and overshirt combo the other day. I just felt like wearing it again. It was another hour before the nurse came back. Kath drank her bottle of water. She wiped her face in her shirt. She thought about how much nicer this waiting room was than the other one at St. Richard's. She tried to mess with her phone, but it was dead. When the nurse came out, Kath stood up. Are you here for Wren, Avery? Kath nodded. You can come back now. Do you want to wait for your mom? Kath shook her head. Wren was in the room by herself. It was dark, and her eyes were closed. Kath couldn't tell if she was sleeping. Do I need to watch her or anything? Kath asked the nurse. No, she's just resting now. Our dad will be here soon, uh, Kath said. Okay, we'll send him back. Kath sat down. Kath sat down slowly, quietly, in the chair by Wren's bed. Wren looked pale. She had a dark spot, maybe a bruise on her cheek. Her hair was longer than it had been at Christmas, hanging over her eyes and curling at her neck. Kath pushed back. I'm awake, you know, Wren whispered. Are you still drunk? A little, muzzy. Kath tucked Wren's hair back again in a soothing gesture. Soothing away for Kath anyway. What happened? Don't remember. Who brought you in? Wren shrugged. There was an IV in her arm and something taped to her index finger. Up close, she smelled like puke and like Wren, like Tide and Marc Jacobs' Lola. Are you okay? Muzzy, she said, sick. Dad? Okay, I don't know what's happening to me. Dad's coming. Wren groaned. Okay. Kath folded her arms on the edge of the mattress and laid her head down, exhaling. I'm glad they brought you in, she said. Whoever it was who brought you in, I'm sorry. That I wasn't there, that you didn't want me there, that I wouldn't have known how to stop you anyway. Now that she was with Wren was okay. Kath realized how exhausted she was. She shoved her glasses into her coat pockets and laid her head back down. She was just drifting off, or maybe she just drifted off. When she heard Wren whimper, Kath lifted her head. Wren was crying. Her eyes were closed, and tears were running down her hair. Kath could almost feel the tickle. What's wrong? Wren shook her head. Kath wiped Wren's tears away with her fingers, and she wiped her fingers on her shirt. Should I get the nurse? Wren shook her head again and started shifting in the bed. Here, she said, making room. Are you sure? Kath asked. I don't want to be the reason you choke on your own vomit. None left, Wren whispered. Kath kicked off her boots and climbed up over the railing. Lying down in the space Wren had cleared for her, she put her arm carefully under Wren's neck. Here, Kath said. Wren curled against her head with Kath's shoulder. Kath tried to untangle the tubes around Wren's arm, then held her hand tightly. It was sticky. Wren's shoulders were still shaking. It's okay, Kath said. It's okay. Kath tried not to fall asleep until Wren did, but it was dark and she was tired and everything was blurry. Oh God, she heard her dad say. Oh, Wren, baby. Kath opened her eyes. Her dad was leaning over at them both. Kissing both their foreheads, Kath sat up carefully. Wren's eyes were crusty and puffy, but open. Their dad stood back and put his hands on Wren's cheek. Jesus Christ, he said, shaking his head. Kid. He was wearing gray dress pants and a light blue shirt, untucked, his tie, orange with white starbursts, was stuffed into a handbag out of his pocket. Presentation clothes, Kath thought. She checked his eyes out of habit. They were tired and shining, but clear. Kath felt overwhelmed then, all of a sudden, and even though this wasn't her show, she leaned forward and hugged him, pressing her face into the stale shirt until she could hear his heart beating. His arm came up around her. Okay, he said roughly. Kath felt Wren take her hand. Okay, their dad said again. We're okay now. Wren didn't have Wren didn't have to stay in the hospital. You can you can sleep and drink water. Wren didn't have to stay in the hospital. You can sleep and drink water at home, the doctor said. Real home. Omaha. You're coming back with me, their dad said, and Wren didn't argue. I'm coming too, Cass said, and he nodded. A nurse took out Wren's IV, and Cather helped her to the bathroom, patting her back while she dry heaved over the sink. Then Kath helped her wash her face and change into her clothes, jeans and a tank top. Where's your coat? Their dad asked. Wren just shrugged. Kath took off her cardigan and handed it to her. It smells like sweat, Wren said. It'll be the best smelling part of you, Kath answered. Then they had to wait for Wren's paperwork. The nurse asked if she'd be able to speak to an addiction specialist. Wren said no. Their dad just frowned. Have you eaten anything? Kath asked him. He yawned. We'll drive through someplace. I'm driving, Kath said. Their dad had tried to figure out a flight to Tulsa the night before, but there weren't any until this afternoon. So he'd ended up renting a car. Kelly gave me the agency visa, and driving for 7 hours. The nurse came back with discharge papers and told Wren that she'd have to leave the hospital in a wheelchair. It's policy. Wren complained, but their dad just stood behind the wheelchair and said, "Do you want to argue, or do you want to go home?" When the nurse buzzed them out into the waiting room, Kath felt her stomach jump and realized that she was half expecting to see Laura still sitting there. Fat chance, Kath thought. The doors opened and Wren made a sobby little gasping noise. For a second, Kath thought maybe Laura was still there, or maybe Wren was trying to throw up again. There was a guy sitting in the waiting room with his head in his hands. He heard Wren's gasp and looked up, then stood up, and Wren was out of the wheelchair, shuffling toward him. He took her in his arms and pushed his face down into her pukey hair. It was the big guy from Muggsy's, the guy who threw punches. Kath couldn't remember his name. Javier, Julio. Uh, who's that? Her dad asked. I don't know if it's Jandro or Yandro. I'm going to go with Jandro, even though I didn't pronounce the J's in the other names. Jandro, Kath said. Ah, he said, watching them hug. Jandro. Yeah, Kath hoped it wasn't Jandro who dropped Wren off at the emergency room, then left her alone. She hoped that he didn't know anything about the bruise on her cheek. Hey, someone said. Kath stepped aside, realizing she was standing in the middle of the hallway. Hey, he said again. She looked up and into Levi's smiling face. Hey, he said, and it almost came out with an exclamation point. What are you doing here? I got your text. I texted you back. My phone's dead. Kath looked up at Levi's crinkle-cut eyes and relieved smile, trying to take them all in. He was holding 2 cups of coffee and a banana shoved into the pocket of his flannel. Mr. Avery, he said, holding out a cup of coffee. This was for Jandro, but it looks like he's covered. Her dad took the coffee. Thanks, Levi. Levi, Kath repeated, and she knew she was close to crying. You didn't have to come. He made a loose fist and chucked her gently on the bottom of her chin, taking a half step toward her. Yeah, I did. Kath tried not to smile, but ended up smiling so wide her ears almost popped. They wouldn't let me back, he said. Or Jandro. Only immediate family. Kath nodded. Is your sister okay? Yeah, hungover, embarrassed. We're going back to Omaha now, all 3 of us. Are you okay? Yeah. She reached for his hand and squeezed it. Thank you, she said. You didn't even know I was here. I know now, and I'll apply these feelings. I know now, and I'll apply these feelings backwards. Thank you. Did you miss your sister's birthday party? No, it's tomorrow after church. I'll take a nap and head back. That way, unless you need anything. Nope. Are you hungry? Kath laughed. Are you about to offer me a banana? I'm about to offer you half a banana, Levi said, letting go of her hand. He gave her the coffee and took the banana out of his pocket, peeling it. Kath glanced over at Ren. She was introducing their dad to Jandro. Ren looked like hell, but Jandro was looking at her like she was the lady of the lake. Levi handed Kath half a banana, and she took it. Cheers, he said, tapping his hand against hers. Kath ate the banana and held on to his gaze. I'd give you the I'd give you the moon right now, she said. Levi's eyes flashed happily, and he ditched up an eyebrow. Yeah, but would you slay it for me? Kath drove home. They drove through McDonald's first. Her dad ordered 2 filet-o-fish sandwiches and said that neither of them could nag him about it. When grimaced, I don't even care if it's bad for you for your cholesterol. It's the smell that's making me sick. Maybe you shouldn't have drunk yourself into Bolivia's stupor, her dad said. And that's when Kath realized he wasn't going to pretend nothing was wrong. That's when he wasn't going to just let Ren go about her business. Kath smashed the cheeseburger against the steering wheel and was the only person on the interstate observing the speed limit. When they got home, Ren went straight to take a shower. When Ren went straight in to take a shower, her dad stood in the living room, looking lost. You go next, Kath told him. I'm not that gross. We have to talk about all this, he said. Tonight, I mean, I'm, I'm not. Tonight, I mean, not you. You don't. Ren and I have to talk. I should have talked to her at Christmas, but there was still so much going on. I'm sorry. Don't, Kath. It's my fault too. I hid it from you. He took off his glasses and rubbed his forehead. Not that, not that. Well, I saw what she was doing. I thought I don't know, self-correct, that she'd get it out of her system. His necktie had worked its way almost completely out of his pocket. You should sleep, Kath said. Take a shower and sleep. Wren walked out of the bathroom, wearing her dad's robe, and smiled feebly at them. Kath patted her dad's arm and then followed Wren upstairs. When Kath got up to the room, Kath was standing in her dresser, impatiently rifling through a mostly empty drawer. We don't have any pajamas. Calm down, Junie B. Jones, Kath said, walking over to her own dresser. Here, she handed Wren a t-shirt and a pair of shorts left over from high school gym. Wren changed and climbed into her bed. Kath crawled on top of the comforter beside her. You smell like puke, Wren said. Yours, Kath said. How are you feeling? Tired. Wren closed her eyes. Kath tapped softly on Wren's forehead. Was that your boyfriend? Yes, Wren whispered. Alejandro. Alejandro, Kath said, breathing the J and rolling the R. Have you ever been have you been dating since last year? Last semester? Yes. Were you out with him last night? Wren shook her head. Tears were starting to pool between her eyelashes. Who'd you go out with? Courtney. How'd you bruise your face? I don't remember, but it wasn't Alejandro. Wren's eyes flew open. God, Kath, no. She squeezed her eyes shut again and flinched. He's probably going to break up with me. He hates it when I get drunk. He says it's unbecoming. He didn't look like he was going to break. He didn't look like he was going to break up with you this morning. Wren took a deep breath. Wren took a deep, shuddering breath. I can't think about it right now. Don't, Kath said. Sleep. Wren slept. Kath went downstairs. Her dad, already asleep. He'd skipped the shower. Kath felt inexplicably peaceful. The last thing Levi said to her when they'd parted in the hospital lobby was, plug in your phone. So Kath did. Then she started to do some laundry. We can't be friends, Baz said, passing Simon the ball. Why not? Simon asked, kicking the ball up and bouncing it on his knee. Because we're already enemies. It's not like we have to stay that way. There isn't a rule. There is a rule, Baz said. I made it myself. Don't be friends with Snow. He already has too many. Uh, he shouldered he shouldered Simon out of the way, and he caught the ball on his own knee. You're infuriating, Simon said. Good. I'm fulfilling my role as your nemesis. You're not my nemesis. The humdrum is. Baz said, letting the ball drop and kicking it back to Simon. We'll see. The story's not over yet. From Baz Baz You Like It, posted September 2008 by fanfics.net authors Magicath and Renegade. 30. We don't need to talk about this, Ren said. You were you were just hospitalized for alcohol poisoning, their dad said. We're talking about it. Kath set a stack of foil wrapped burritos on the table between them and sat down at the head of the table. There's nothing to say, Ren insisted. She still looked terrible. There were circles under her eyes, and her skin was waxy and yellow. You're just going to say I shouldn't drink that much, and then I'm going to say that you're right. No, their dad interrupted. I'm going to say that you shouldn't drink at all. Well, that's not very realistic. He smacked his fist on the table. Why the hell not? Ren sat back in her chair and took a second to recover. He'd never cursed at either of them. Everybody drinks, she said calmly. The only, uh, yeah. Ren sat back in her chair and took a second to recover. He never cursed at either of them. Everybody drinks, she said calmly. The only rational one. Your sister doesn't. Ren rolled her eyes. Forgive me, but I'm not going to spend my college years sitting soberly in my dorm room writing about gay magicians. Objection, Cass said, reaching for a burrito. Sustained, their dad said. Your sister has a 4.0, Ren, and a very polite boyfriend. She's doing just fine with her college years. Ren's head whipped around. You have a boyfriend? You haven't met Levi? Their dad sounded surprised and sad. Are you guys even talking? You stole your roommate's boyfriend? Ren's eyes were big. It's a long story, Cass said. Ren kept staring at her. Have you kissed him? Ren, their dad said. I'm serious about this. What do you want me to say? I drank too much. You're out of control, he said. I'm fine. I'm just 18. Exactly, he said. You're coming back home. Kath almost spit out her carnitas. I am not, Ren said. You are. You can't make me, she said, managing to sound at least 12. I can, actually. He was tapping his fingers so hard on the table it looked painful. I'm your father. I'm pulling rank. I should have done this a long time ago. But better late than never, I guess. I'm your father. Dad, Kath whispered. No, he said, staring at Ren. I'm not letting this happen to you. I'm not taking a call like that again. I'm not spending every weekend from now on wondering where you are and who you're with and whether you're sober enough to know when you've landed in the gutter. Kath had seen her dad this mad before, heard him rant, watched him wave his arms around, cursing, steam pouring out of his ears, but it was never about them. It was never at them. This was a warning, he said, stabbing his finger at Ren, nearly shouting. This was your canary in the goddamn coal mine, and you're trying to ignore it. What kind of father would I be if I sent you back to school knowing you hadn't learned your lesson? I'm 18, Ren shouted. Kath thought this was probably a bad strategy. I don't care, he shouted back. You're still my daughter. It's the middle of the semester. I'll fail all my classes. You weren't worried about school or your future when you were poisoning yourself with tequila. She cocked her head. How do you know I was drinking tequila? Christ, Ren, he sighed bitterly. You smelled like a margarita blender. You kinda still do, Kath muttered. Ren planted her elbows on the table and hid her face in her hands. Everybody drinks, she said stubbornly. Their dad pushed his chair back. If that's all you have to say for yourself, then all I have to say is you're coming home. He got up and went to his room, slamming the door. Ren let her head and her hands fall to the table. Kath scooted her chair closer. Do you want some aspirin? Ren was quiet for a few seconds. Why aren't you mad at me? Why should I be mad at you? Kath asked. You've been mad at me since November, since July. Well, I'm done now. Does your head hurt? You're done? Ren turned her head towards Kath, her cheek lying on the table. You scared me last night, Kath said, and I decided that I never want to drift that far away from you again. What if you died, and I hadn't talked to you for 3 months? I wasn't going to die. Ren rolled her eyes again. Dad's right, Kath said. You sound like a moron. Ren, look, Ren looked down, rubbing her face and her wrists. I'm not going to stop drinking. Why not? Kath wanted to ask. Instead, she said, just pause then, for the rest of the year, just to show him that you can. I can't believe that you have a boyfriend, Ren whispered, and I didn't even know about it. Her shoulders started to shake. She was crying again. Kath had never seen Ren cry this much. Hey, Kath said, it's okay. I wasn't going to die, Ren said. Okay. I've really missed you. Are you still drunk? Kath asked. I don't think so. Kath leaned over on the edge of her chair and tugged at Ren's hair. It's okay. I miss you too. Not all this drunk stuff, but you. I've been a jerk to you, Ren whispered into the table. I was a jerk back. That's true, Ren said, but God, will you forgive me? No, Kath said. Ren looked up pathetically. I don't have to forgive you, Kath said. It's not like that with you. You're just in with me, always, no matter what happens. Ren lifted her head and wiped her eyes on the back of her thumbs. Yeah? Kath nodded her head. Yeah. Their dad went for a run. Ren ate a burrito and went back to bed. Kath finally read all her texts from Leroy. Turning round right now. Be there by 3. Cather, I really care about you. You seemed like maybe a good time to tell you that. Hour away now. In the waiting room. Not family. Can't come back. Andro's here too. Here, okay? If you need me. Let me pause for a second. Back in Arnold. Gorgeous day. Did you know Arnold has uh, Did you know Arnold has Los Canyons and Sand Hills and oh wait, Los Canyons? Like what the heck is that? Anyway, the biological diversity would make you weep. Catherine Avery, call me sweetheart, and by that I mean you should call me, not that you should call me sweetheart. Though you can if you want. Call me, call me, call me. Kath did. Levi was having dinner with his family. You okay? He asked. Yeah, it's just tense. My dad's mad at Ren, but he doesn't really know how to be mad at either of us, and Ren is acting like a huge brat. I don't think she knows how to be wrong. I wish I could talk more, Levi said, but my mom's weird about phone calls during family time. I'll call you tomorrow from the road, okay? Only if the road is straight and flat and there's no other traffic. Will you be back tomorrow? He asked. I don't know. I miss you. That's stupid, she said. I saw you this morning. It's not the time, uh, Levi said, and she could hear that he was smiling. It's the distance. A few minutes later, he texted her, Idea. If you're bored and you miss me, you should go write some dirty fanfiction about us. You can read it to me later. Great idea? Or great idea, right? Cass smiled down at her phone stupidly. She tried to imagine what it would be like to move back home, to leave Levi behind. She couldn't even think about what it was going to be like this summer without him. Their dad wouldn't their dad wouldn't really do this, make Ren drop out of school. That would be crazy. But their dad was crazy. And maybe he was right. Ren was out of control. She was the worst kind of out of control. The kind that thinks it's just fine. Or thinks it's just fine, thanks. Kath liked the idea of Ren here. Ren and her dad, all in one place where Kath could take care of them. If only Kath could break off a piece of herself and leave it here to keep watch. The front door opened and Eric Kath huffed in from his run, still breathing hard, dropping his keys and his phone on the table. Hey, he said to Kath, taking off his glasses to wipe his face, then putting them back on. Hey, she said, I put your burrito in the oven. He nodded and walked past her in the kitchen. Kath followed. Are you coming to plead her case? He asked. No. She could have died, Kath. I know, and I think it's been bad for a long time. I think she's just been lucky. As far as we know, her dad said. I just dropping. Wait. I just dropping out of school? Do you have a better idea? Kath shook her head. Maybe she should talk to a counselor or something. Her dad made a face like Kath had thrown something wet at him. God, Kath, how would you feel if somebody forced you to talk to a counselor? Somebody has, she thought. I'd hate it, she said. Yeah. He had a burrito out of the oven and onto a plate, and he was pouring himself a glass of milk. He looked tired and still completely miserable. I love you, she said. He looked up, holding the carton of milk over the glass. Some of the strain disappeared from his forehead. I love you too, he said, like it was a question. It just seemed like a good time to tell you, she said. Her dad nodded, his eyes full of some tense feeling. Can I borrow your laptop? She asked. Yeah, of course. It's in. I know, thanks. Kath went to the living room and picked up her dad's silver laptop. She lusted over this thing, but he always said he didn't need an $1,800 word processor. When Kath got upstairs, Wren was Wren was on the phone, crying. She got up off her bed and walked into the closet, sitting on the floor, closing the door behind her. This wasn't strange behavior, except for the crying. It was it's what they always did when they needed privacy. They had a big closet. Kath opened her fanfics account and paged idly through comments. There were too many to respond to individually, so she posted back a general, "Hey everybody, thanks. Was too busy writing to write back." Then opened up the draft of her most recent chapter. She had left it off with Baz kneeling at his mother's gravestone. He was trying to explain to her why he was turning against his father, why he was turning back on the house of pitch to fight by Simon's side. It's not just for him, Baz said, running his long fingers over his mother's name. It's for Watford. It's for the world of mages. After a while, Wren came out of the closet and crawled onto Cass's bed. Cass scooted over and kept typing. And after another while, Wren got under the covers and fell asleep. And after that, a while later, her dad peeked up over the top of the stairs. He looked at Kath and mouthed, "Good night." Kath nodded. She wrote 1,000 words. She wrote 1,000 words. She wrote 500 more. Uh, all right. I'm gonna break the flow of reading for a sec because that reminded me of the song. Like I would walk 1,000 miles and I would walk or well, I guess 1,000 more, not 500 more. So never mind. Or is it five? Never mind. I broke the flow of reading for absolutely no reason other than stupidity. So, but back to the reading. All right. The room was dark, and Kath wasn't sure how long Wren had been awake or how long she'd been reading over Kath's elbow. Is the mage really going to betray Simon, or is it a red herring? Wren was whispering, even though there was nobody to wake up. I think he really is, Kath said. That chapter where he had Simon burn the dragon eggs made me cry for 3 days. Kath stopped typing. You read that? Of course I did. Have you seen your hits lately? They're through the roof. Nobody's bailing on Carry On now. I thought you had, Cass said, a long time ago. Well, you were wrong. Wren propped her head up on her hand. Add that to the towering stack of important things you're wrong about. I think the mage is going to kill Baz. Kath hadn't told anyone else about that yet. Not even her beta. Wren sat up, her face actually aghast. Kath, she whispered. No. Did Alejandro break up with you? Wren shook her head. No, he's just upset. Kath, you can't kill Baz. Kath couldn't think of what to say. Wren took her laptop and slid it mostly into her own lap. Jesus Christ, consider this an intervention. When Kath woke up the next morning, Sunday, she was alone in the bedroom. She could smell coffee and food. She went downstairs and found her dad sitting at the table with a notebook. She handed she sorry. She handed him his laptop. Ah, good, he said. Ren, uh, Ren said we have to wait for you. For what? For my for my verdict. I'm about to go all King Solomon on your asses. Who's King Solomon? It was your mother who wanted it was your mother who wanted to raise you without religion. She also thought you should raise us she also thought you should raise us without a mother. Solid point, my dear. Ren, come on. Your sister's awake. Ren walked into the dining room, holding a saucepan and a trivet. You were asleep, she said, sitting on the table, so I made breakfast. Oh, Christ, her dad said. Is that gravioli? No, Ren said. It's new cheese gravioli. Sit down, he said. We're talking. He was in running clothes again. He looked tense and nervous. Ren sat down. She was acting playful, but she was nervous. Nervous too. Kath could tell by the way she was squeezing her fists. Kath wanted to reach out and unclench them. Okay, their dad said, pushing the gravioli away. Yeah, so that it wasn't right between them on the table. Here are my terms. You can go back to school, Rhoda Kath exhaled, but you don't drink at all. Not in moderation, not with your boyfriend, not at parties, never. You're seeing a counselor every week, starting this week, and you start attending AA meetings. Dad, Ren said, I'm not an alcoholic. Good, it's not contagious. You're going to meetings. I'll go with you, Kath offered. I'm not done, their dad said. What more do you want? Ren whined. Blood tests? You come home every weekend, Dad. Or you can just move home. It's your choice, really. I have a life, Ren said, in Lincoln. Don't talk to me about your life, kid. You've shown complete disregard for your life. Ren's hands were tight fists, lumps of coal in her lap. Kath kicked her ankle. Ren's head dropped. Fine, she said. Fine. Good, their dad said, then took a deep breath and held on to it for a second. I'll drive you back later, if you think you're ready. He stood up and looked at the gravioli. I'm not eating that. He pulled the pan closer and picked up a spoon. I'll eat it. She took a bite. The noodly parts dissolved immediately in her mouth. I know how soft it is, she said. I like how I don't have to use my teeth. Ren watched Kath for a few seconds, then took the spoon and scooped up a bite. It tastes like regular gravioli. Kath took it back, but cheesier. It's 3 comfort foods in one, Ren said. They're like pizza pillows. They're like wet Cheetos. That's terrible, Kath said. We can't use that. I'm starting to feel like you don't want me around. I've never wanted you around, Simon said, trying to push past his roommate. Point. Baz moved to block the door. That was true until you decided that you always wanted me around, that life is just a hollow shell of its former self, unless you know my heart is beating somewhere in the very local vicinity. Have I decided that? Maybe it was me who decided. Never mind. Same difference. Simon took a deep, obviously unnerved breath. Snow, are you unnerved? Slightly. Alistair Almighty, I never thought I'd see the day. From Carry On Simon, posted February 2012 by fanfics.net author Magic Hath. And with that, I am definitely going to need a break. So, yeah, I don't really have anything to say, so I'll just see you on the next one.